Percy and Duck like working at the harbour by the sea. On a clear summer's night, there is no better place to be. The big ships bring passengers. Cargo ships carry machinery and other things. Duck and Percy puff backwards and forwards with the crates of cargo as they are loaded and unloaded by the quayside. One morning, Duck and Percy noticed that the horizon was packed with sails flapping against the blue sky. "I wish I could sail to faraway lands," sighed Duck. "Engines can't go sailing," snorted Percy, "because engines can't float." Duck still had his dreams. Suddenly they were rudely interrupted. "Wakey, wakey," hovered Harold. "I'm looking at the boats," replied Duck. "That's the regatta," whirred Harold. "Lots of boats, lots of races, great fun. I hover round in case I'm needed." "Do you go to the horizon?" asked Duck. "Yes, and beyond." "I didn't know there was a beyond," whispered Percy. "Do you go to other places at sea?" continued Duck. "Certainly. I can land on ships, you know, anywhere, anytime. Goodbye." Duck sighed. He went on talking about the regatta all day. Percy lost patience. "Well, Duck, I'd rather have my wheels on solid ground. Our rails can take us to all the places we could ever wish to see." "That's an emergency," called Duck's driver. "I'll check with the harbour master." He returned with bad news. "A man taking part in the regatta has hurt his hand. We're to take him to the hospital at the next station. Harold's bringing him now. Come on." "Good to see you again, Duck," whirred Harold as he landed carefully on the platform. The man was gently helped to safety. "My job is to stay at sea in case of other emergencies. Otherwise, I would take this gentleman to hospital myself. Must fly. Goodbye." Duck set off on his journey. Soon he was steaming well and his wheels were thundering along the track. When they reached the station, the man thanked everyone and Bertie got ready to take him to hospital. "You look splendid flying along the line, Duck," glowed Bertie. "No wonder they call you Great Western." Percy's right, Duck thought to himself. Engines are happiest when their wheels are firmly on the rails. That night, Percy and Duck stayed a little longer at the quay. The air was warm and the sea calm. "There's a shooting star," said Duck. "Don't be daft," laughed Percy. "It's Harold. Look, he's hovering overhead." Something fluttered down towards Duck. His driver caught it. "It's a flag from the regatta. Harold's giving it to you as a present, Duck." "That was kind of Harold," whispered Duck. "He may have whirly arms instead of wheels, but he seems to understand just what an engine needs." Duck still wonders about the lands beyond the horizon, but he enjoys being with friends most of all, and I think he knows that sometimes the best travels are those we can only dream about. Don't you? Oliver and his brake van Toad liked working in the big yards, but one morning Toad noticed that Oliver was unhappy. He decided to find out why.
"Excuse me, Mr. Oliver, it seems to me that things are not well with you, if you forgive me for mentioning it."
"You're quite right, Toad," replied Oliver. "All I do is shunt these trucks onto the turntable. I long for a nice run. It's what an engine really needs.
Quite so, Mr. Oliver. May I suggest that you speak to the Fat Controller about your problems? Oliver just grew unhappier, and he was rough with the trucks. You're no good, Oliver. You're dangerous. We want Percy. Pa, Percy's far too busy to be bothered with the likes of you. And he bumped the trucks hard. You silly engine, shouted a workman. It'll take a long time to repair this turntable, which'll cause confusion and delay. That night, the Fat Controller came to see Oliver in his shed. Oliver, you have caused confusion. I thought you could control trucks. You shall work the mail train for a while. Maybe the night air will clear your smoke box. Yes, sir. Sorry, sir, said Oliver sadly. Cheer up, old chap, said his driver. The mail train run is a grand run for a fine engine like you. Oliver smiled, but he still felt he'd let everyone down. His driver took them along the coastal run with the mail train. The sea was calm and the fresh air couldn't help but brighten Oliver's spirits. They made good speed until it was time to collect some important mail from Harold the helicopter. Come on, Harold. They waited and waited. At last, Harold landed. Sorry I'm late, Great Western. Had a bit of a problem with one of my arms. Kept letting me down when I was meant to be up. You know how it is, said Harold. We know that we'll be late for our first run, replied Oliver's driver. Soon they were on their way again. Ahead was a red signal light. Oliver didn't realise that the signalman had dozed off waiting for them. Oliver whistled several times, but the signal stayed red. There must be something wrong with that signal. We'll go slowly and stop by the signal box, said his driver. But they never reached it. The points before the signal box were switched to an old track. They were going the wrong way. Oliver's fireman was concerned. We need to find a water tower soon. Instead, they saw an old run-down station. Disaster lay ahead. Meanwhile, the Fat Controller was very worried. Oliver has not returned. We had better send out a search party. Soon he was high in the sky with Harold. There they are. It wasn't Oliver's fault, sighed the driver. I'm aware of that. I'm just glad you are all safe. Then he saw something. It was an empty old house beside the station. He went to inspect it. When he returned, he spoke to Oliver. Oliver, you have found another attraction for our island. We'll make this house as good as new and visitors can come and have tea and crumpets there. Sighed Oliver happily. Getting lost can be interesting, but being found is much nicer, especially when it makes an engine feel really useful.
Thomas the Tank Engine was feeling very happy. His blue coat shone in the sun, he was right on time, and all around his branch line the countryside seemed prettier than ever before. Beep, beep! Good morning, Percy, he whistled. My branch line is the pride of the line, wouldn't you agree? Yes, Thomas, of course, but... But what, Percy? Out with it. Well, there is another engine with a famous branch line too. Who? Where? Exclaimed Thomas anxiously. His name's Stepney. He's far away, but the Fat Controller says he may visit us. When? Oh, someday. And Percy hurried away. Meanwhile, Stepney was puffing purposefully along his line. It runs through fields and forests, but isn't very long, which made him feel a little sad. Later, he saw Rusty. The little diesel had helped save Stepney from scrap. Everyone's been so kind, but my railway is so short, and I do miss a good long run. I think you should tell Driver too, replied Rusty. I'm sure he'll understand. Stepney soon discovered that indeed he did. Do you know, Stepney, I feel just the same way. That evening, Stepney's driver had exciting news. Guess what, Stepney? The Fat Controller has invited us to visit the other engines on his railway. Manager agreed. It'll be a really long run to get there. Oh, thank you, sighed Stepney. They set off next morning. By now, all the other engines were talking about Stepney. He runs a famous branch line. Did you know that? Said Percy. Thomas was feeling a little jealous. Huh, it may be famous, but my branch is first on the line. Everyone knows that, too. And he huffed away to fetch his coaches. Look, squeaked Percy. Why have they all come? There is no train yet. But Percy was wrong. The signal dropped, and from far away an engine whistled. Here he comes, yelled Douglas. Stepney puffed proudly through the junction. All the engines were pleased to see him. I hope you'll meet Thomas too, said Edward. You both have branch lines to be proud of. Then Stepney set off to help Duck shunt coaches in the yards, and they worked happily together all afternoon. At last, Thomas arrived. Sorry, can't talk. It's time for my last branch line train. Mustn't be late. He was hardly out of sight when the engines heard shouting at the station. Moments later came the alarm. Stop all trains! The signalman answered the telephone. A special, is it? I see. Thomas was impatient. Why are we waiting? My passengers are being delayed. Sorry, Thomas, said his driver. We're being shunted to allow another train to pass. Soon, they heard an unfamiliar puffing sound. There was Stepney with headlamps swaying and whistle blowing. He gathered speed and disappeared. Well, bust my boiler, said Thomas the Tank Engine. Next morning, Thomas was still fuming. Shunted, and on my own branch too. It's a disgrace. I'm sorry, said Stepney. I was a special. Why? An important passenger arrived just as you left. He ordered a special train and Duck let me take it. We had a splendid run, but, finished Thomas kindly, it can make an engine nervous not to know the line. Exactly, said Stepney. You're such an expert. This made Thomas feel much better. He couldn't be cross anymore and instead began telling Stepney all about his branch line.